Hi guys, it's Jess here from Just Jess CRUMB COAT. Today I wanted to show you how I trim and crumb coat my cakes. And so there's a few things that you'll need, the first being a cake turntable. It's almost impossible to decorate a good cake without one of these, so it is an essential. The next thing you'll need is your cake board. You will need a cake leveler. So this is a little device with a wire, and there's all different rungs down here for different heights, so you can set the height of your cake. You will need a cake comb. This one has two different sides. We're going to be using the straight side for the crumb coat. The next thing you will need are your spatulas. So this is a regular large spatula and an offset spatula. You'll see this one is offset. A regular spatula, this is just for scooping up buttercream. And finally, your buttercream and your cake. First of all, we need to trim the cake. So when you cook a cake, it will often cook with a domey lid or an uneven top. So that's what we use this cake trimmer for, so we can get them both nice and flat so that our cake is level. Just for reference, this cake is a 6-inch cake, and it feeds between 12 and 18 people, depending on how big you slice it. It's also a red velvet cake. Okay, so these layers are both basically the same height, but we want to measure it on our cake leveler. Obviously, we want to keep as much cake as possible, so we're going to take this up so it's just trimming up off the top. And that's much better, so we're just taking off the top. When I trim the top of my cakes, I like to keep a hand firmly on the top, just to stop the cake moving around while you're trimming it and to stop any breakage. I'm going to go ahead and cut this one. You just saw it back and forth. And when I get to about this point, I like to just pop my fingers around the side of the cake to push into while I'm cutting. If you don't do this, you can sometimes get a whole side of the cake that breaks away. So I just push it in so that we get a clean break. And then the tops come off. And now we have two even layers. So now we're ready to ice and fill the cake. So take your turntable. I'm going to stick a piece of non-slip mat on here. So this is non-slip mat. You can get it from hardware stores or sometimes a supermarket. It's often what people use to put in the bottom of their drawers to stop things sliding around. So it just means that your cake board will be nice and stable when you're icing the cake. So first of all, with my offset spatula, I grab a little bit of buttercream and chuck it on the board. This is to make the cake layer stick to the board. So you just pop it on like that, and then I like to dab it with the spatula just so it creates a rough texture on the buttercream, which I find the cake sticks to better. And we'll pop our first layer of cake on. When making a 2-layer cake, I always like to pop the first layer with the cut side facing up, so that the flattest side, which was cooked against the bottom of the cake tin, is on the bottom, creating a nice level base. And in the second layer we pop upside down, so that again the flattest part that was cooked on the cake tin is on the top of the cake, meaning you're going to be nice and square. Now the reason we do a crumb coat is just to lock in all of the crumbs on the cake, because when you have your final layer of decorative icing, you don't want there to be crumbs all through it. So this is just a thin layer. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just to set in all those crumbs. Then we set it in the fridge and come back later to decorate. So I'm just going to chuck a bunch of buttercream on there. Grab my offset spatula and work the buttercream around. So I just like to push it around so that it's all over the cake layer before I flatten it out. And you'll see we're getting quite a lot of overhang. And then we want to keep our spatula at a flat level and just spin the cake around. This is why the turntable is so important. Scrape off any excess, so we want this layer to be as flat as possible for our next cake to go on top of. So now that I've done that, you'll see there's a whole lot of overhang of icing. I now like to go in and smooth that around the edges to create a border for the next layer in the filling. So I'm just going to move around the cake and push that around, and you'll see it's creating a border on top of the cake, like a rough edge, and this is exactly what we want. So the reason I like to put the border around is so when I fill the cake with caramel or raspberry coulis, it has a barrier so that it doesn't spill out the sides, and I also find it helps that cake to stick on better. If the border's not quite high enough, you can either go in with a piping bag filled with the buttercream and go around the edge to create a border, or you can simply just pop some more buttercream on the edge to create a higher and thicker border, which is what I usually do. So as you can see now, we've got a nice high border, and I am going to fill this with some salted caramel. So we've got some filling in the cake. I'm going to spread that around with a clean spatula just to make sure that every slice of cake would have the same amount of caramel. Like this. And then we're going to pop our second layer of cake on top, remembering to pop it upside down. Pop that on there, lightly tap down on it just to make sure that it's all stuck together, and then go around, just spin it around and make sure that the sides are level. So now we just repeat the process, chuck some more icing on top, and again with our offset spatula, move the icing around the top of the cake. Again, creating that overhang. Then you can either carry on with your offset spatula, or sometimes if you have quite a large cake, you can use your big spatula just to go around the edge and smooth the icing. So now we have a roughly coated cake, which is where we now come in with our cake comb using the straight side and go around the cake. I like to start almost opposite myself with my hand on the turntable and my hand on the cake comb, and you want to do a full circle. So you don't want to, you want to try and not to stop midway, because this can create a line in the cake. Obviously on your first few goes, you can do a few parts at a time, and then your final scoop around will be one full circle. So what ends up happening to me is I start with my hand over here, I come all the way around, and then I push it and use my arm all the way through to my elbow, and that's kind of once around the cake, or a little bit over. I'm going to go in now. You like to hold the cake comb at like a 45-degree angle on the cake. I find that easiest, and then we're going to start and go around. And then scrape the excess buttercream off, like so. So as you can see, there's still some gaps where the cake comb didn't touch around the top, so I'm going to smooth out the buttercream and add some more so that next time we go around with the cake comb it's even. So I'm just adding a little more to the top. You can also use the top of the icing. And again, we want to keep the top as level as possible, so place your offset spatula flat and spin the cake around until you've got a flat surface. Sometimes you need to spread a bit more back on, and just do this enough times until you're happy with the level. Like I say, it doesn't have to be perfect. This is just a crumb coat and not the final layer of icing. Then just kind of move this around so that it's not too sharp. And then we go back in again with the cake comb. The good thing about these cake combs is they're nice and tall. As you can see, you've got so much more room if you wanted to do a 3 or 4 or 5 layer cake. They're 25 centimeters high and they have a perfectly sharp corner, so that way you can line it up with the board and the cake to get a perfectly straight edge. Cool, so I am happy with that. Now we need to level off the sides, the top side of the cake. As you can see, there is a wee border. We need to level this off and make it flat. To do this, you'll also need your offset spatula, and I like to keep some paper towels handy just to wipe the excess icing off of it. So you want to start out with a perfectly clean offset spatula. If it has buttercream on it, it's going to leave it on the side of the cake, so you want it to be perfectly clean every time you go in. The reason we use an offset spatula is because you can get that level flat without your wrist or your hand kind of getting into the cake. So what we do is we just get the edge and drag it inwards. Wipe off the excess icing, wipe it with a paper towel to make sure there's none left on there, and just keep doing this until you've gone around the entire cake. So there we go. As you can see, that edge is not perfect. It's not a huge deal, as we're going to go back in later and decorate with the final layer of icing. If you want to get it a little bit more sharp, you can use your cake comb, go around the edge again, and which will create just a slight border on the top as it pushes the buttercream up. And then you can go in with a clean cake comb and tidy up again. Making sure to scrape the excess off every time. So now our crumb coat edge is a lot sharper. This cake is now going to go into the fridge for at least a couple of hours before we go back and decorate. We want this layer of icing to be nice and chilled so that we've got a good base to work on when we go in with the decorative layer. Thank you for watching. I hope that was helpful, and let me know if you have any questions. Bye!